this talk originally Methodist potters and pottery and potters, but I've narrowed it down to talking about Methodist commemorative and ornamental pottery, and telling the story of that. Obviously, the original title encompasses many more things than that, but you can look forward to that on another day. So if we can start with the first slide, Ruth. The next slide. Yeah. In 1913, a chap called James Bodley gave the Methodist Conference what was then the largest collection of Methodist memorabilia. The photograph on the left shows this collection when it was on display in the 1950s in the Wesley's house in City Road. Moving on down to today, there are now large displays of pottery to be seen both at the Museum of Methodism at City Road, Epworth Old Rectory, both of which have inherited items from the Bodley collection. The New Room in Bristol, the very large Horace Hurd collection at Mount Zion, Ogden and Halifax, and of course at Englesea Brook. And what I want to do in this talk is to say something, look into the story of what this pottery, how this pottery came about, and what it tells us, if anything, and look into interesting questions as to its iconography, who made it, and probably most interestingly, which is most difficult to answer, why. Most of the illustrations I'll be using are items for, largely for convenience. I'll be using items from my own collection, which is the photograph on the right there. So moving on. Ruth, yeah, so, but by the middle of the 1760s, Wesley had achieved what might be described as celebrity status. And as with modern celebrities, he advertised his tour dates in advance, as it were. In the Manchester Mercury for the 4th of March 1760, there's this one that says, "Notice is hereby given that the Reverend John Wesley intends to preach at the following places on the undermentioned days, viz. Burslem, Saturday, March the 8th, at 7 in the evening, Sunday at Congleton, Monday at Congleton again, Stockport on the Tuesday, and so on." And it's perhaps not surprising that his celebrity was seen by some, including pottery manufacturers, as a merchandising opportunity. And so we come to the first two items, which are the earliest I want to talk about. The one on the left, a creamware teapot with a portrait of Wesley after a painting by Hone. This seems to have been produced round about 1780. Possibly in North Staffordshire and possibly by Wedgwood. The transfer is by a chap called Green, who was a Liverpool chap who did do work for Wedgwoods. The jug on the right, which is the one on the left, is I've taken offline, but the one on the right, which is a creamware jug dating from the 1790s, has on it an acrostic based on Wesley's name. So it's a lot of doggerel, really. Jehovah reigns, let saints and men adore, obey ye sinners, and so on. There are a number of other items from this time, but I want to move on now to the famous bust produced by Enoch Wood. When visiting Newcastle in 1774, Wesley was invited to lodge with the mayor, a chap called James Bourne, no relation to the primitive Methodist Bourne. And in this, and also in the at about the same time, when in Burslem, he lodged at the house of Bourne's son, a master potter called John Bourne. John Bourne's sister Anne was married to Enoch Wood in 1780. Wood was a skilled pottery modeler, and in 1781 modelled a portrait bust of John Wesley, and it was likely that this was done in John Bourne's house. There are 2 chairs currently at Epworth Rectory, supposedly from John Bourne's house, and therefore it is possible by a huge stretch of imagination that Wesley was sitting in one of these when he was modelled, which is the reason for the 2 chairs in the photograph. There's been a certain amount of ink spilt over the years as to whether this portrait was done in 1781 or 1784, but I think the most likely story is that the bust was modelled in 1781, but didn't actually go into production, as it were, till Wood had his own factory, which he'd got by 1784. Interestingly, Wesley preached in 1784 in the new preaching house at Hanley Green, and I've recently discovered through a bit of ephemera that turned up wearing my Archivist hat that Wood was a trustee of that chapel. So there are numerous ways in which Wood would have come into contact with Wesley. For many years, the bust to the right of this image, which was made about 1800 by Wood, stood on the mantelpiece of the vestry of the Wesley Place Chapel in Tunstall, and wherein it symbolically, silently yet symbolically, as it were, presided over the proceedings therein, and all those privileged to enter that particular holy of holies, mainly the chapel trustees and so on. Similar, and of course many similar ones, and numerous copies by other factories, soon graced the mantelpieces of many Methodist homes, no doubt performing the same function. I was talking, and of course, in Methodist the studies of many Methodist ministers down to this day. There followed a few portrait busts of other significantly Methodist figures. There are ones known of Adam Clark, and this one is of the Reverend Dr. Joseph Beaumont. It was done in April 1854 by a chap called Edwin Sherritt, about whom I know absolutely nothing, or indeed who made this Parian bust. But as I say, Beaumont in his day, very few people will know anything about him today, but in his day he was a very popular preacher, much in demand. I recently came across entries on the ecclesiastical census of 1851 for places in Burslem, and that day Beaumont, when the census was taken, Beaumont was preaching in the Wesleyan chapel in Burslem, and the incumbent of St Paul's reported that his congregation was reduced because everybody had gone to hear Beaumont, and the Wesleyan chapel, they said their congregation was above average for exactly the same reason, which is interesting. The other item shown there is a portrait of a chapel. This is a money box, quite a well-known model, which is actually of the Wesleyan chapel in Bank Street, Mexborough, which the building still exists. No longer, not been a chapel, I don't think, since the 19th century, but it's been a shop. But yeah, the little photograph at the top there is taken off Instant Street View on the Street View. Many of these, there are two figures in front of the model. The model dates from about 1840 originally. The two figures are obviously supposed to be Sunday school children. Some have got labeled. Some are labelled Wesleyan Chapel. Some have got mine. In the photograph says Savings Bank, and the photograph which I've taken offline of the little other photograph has a name, Thornley, and says primitive chapel, spelt wrong, primitive chapel on it, but it's still the chapel in Mexborough. I think a lot of them were sort of used as christening presents and that sort of thing. The first big event which generated pottery was the Wesleyan Methodist centenary in 1839, which is the Wesleyan Methodist Conference in July 1839 gave directions for the celebration of the Wesleyan centenary, recommending that members and friends of society hold simultaneous religious meetings on Friday the 25th of October 1839. How this date was arrived at is interesting. It was taken to be the centenary of the first formation of the first Methodist Society, which was taken to be that, I think, in London at the Foundry or at Bristol, it's not entirely clear, in November or December 1739, hence the centenary in 1839. A lot of pottery was produced. And it falls basically into, really, most of it falls into two basic types. The one at the mug at the top is a lustreware mug made by a pottery, one of the potteries around Sunderland. It has the portrait of Wesley, an inscription saying it commemorates the Wesley Methodist centenary, 1839, and a verse of a hymn of Wesley off on the other side. And this set of transfers, etc., appears on all sorts of pottery, on plaques and lovefish cups, etc., and mugs like that one. The two items at the bottom are from a range of pottery, which was produced by the firm of Podmore, Walker and Co. in Tunstall. And they all show a similar portrait of Wesley and a picture of the centenary, the newly acquired Centenary Hall in London, which thereby hangs a story by itself, but it is outside the scope of the talk. But suffice it to say that the partners in Podmore, Walker and Co., that's Thomas Podmore, Thomas Walker. The and Co is Enoch Wedgwood, a distant relation to Josiah, and all the I think another important chap in the factory is a manager or something, is a chap called Daniel Spilsbury, and all these folk were connected with the Wesleyan chapel in and the Sunday school in Tunstall, so they're all Methodists, and the ware is marked at the bottom, centenary, PW and Co., which is Podmore, Walker and Co. So we'll now move on to the earliest primitive Methodist item, which is this plate, which was produced in 1830, and there's it's a very interesting story. This that connected with this plate. It was produced by the firm of Bourne, Nixon and Co. Now, Bourne, Nixon and Co. is James Bourne, the brother of Hugh, James Nixon, another well-known early primitive Methodist, who was a potter, John Hancock, another leading primitive Methodist, who was an engraver, William Lees, about whom I know nothing, who between them bought this pottery factory for an enormous sum of money in about 1829, 1830. And apart from these plates, I've seen one other item produced by this, which is a blue and white plate, marked BN and Co., which is to an Asiatic peasant design pattern or something like that, which has been on sale for America for some years. The trouble is, they want 75 quid for it, another 70 quid for posting it to England. So although it's tempting to acquire that one because of the connection with Bourne, Nixon and Co., I never have. But going back to these plates, which are actually not uncommon, what the plate was, I think, what the plate was in aid of is it commemorates, in my view, the completion of the deed poll, which was enrolled in Chancery on the 5th February 1830. As you can see, you've got on the plate, you've got Bourne himself, James Bourne, and Clowes. The image of Bourne is was used inter alia as the frontispiece for one of the hymn books I've got, famously printed in book 1829, but very probably had been used in the magazine. I mean, ditto the image of Clowes, which is the photograph on the right, the top right, is taken from Kendall. And Kendall says he got it from a frontispiece of an early edition of the Minutes. But the deed poll was in fact a deed of settlement, which gave formal legal identity to the primitive Methodist connection, and was executed by the three surviving members of the original preparatory committee. That's Hugh and James Bourne and Williams Clowes, who were the three people on the plate, and James Steele. James Steele, in fact, died about 1827, 1828, which is presumably why he's not on the thing. The deed poll recited inter alia that Hugh and James Bourne did in March 1810 establish a congregation at Stanley, in which place they formed a society and class, and went on to declare that societies and classes in several parts of England were under the care of Hugh and James Bourne, William Clowes, and William Steele, were formed into one community, distinguished by the title or name of the primitive Methodist connection. So that, as I say, that deed gives the official legal recognition of the primitive Methodist connection, and also, incidentally, fixes the dates at which future commemorations can be dated from, because it recites the first camp meeting held 31st of May 1807, first class formed March 1810, and from August 1829 these words appear on the class tickets. So that I've got the two class tickets shown are pre-18 August and post-August 1829. The one on the left, the one on the right has headed Primitive Methodist Connection and has these two dates, which appeared on all the subsequent class tickets, and which a point which I will come back to. The next item in date is this portrait bust of William Clowes, which was produced by the firm of Barker, Sutton and Till round about 1840. Now, it could have been that whoever, with no idea who modelled it, it could have been modelled from the portrait I've already referred to, which would have been as I say, would have been circulating in the magazine or somewhere. Or it could have been modelled from life. Now, of course, by the 1830s, 1840s, Clowes was based in Hull, but he was a popular preacher, and hence he got invited for preaching annual sermons for Sunday schools, etc., as he did in 1843 in the Burslem Sunday School, which is at that time was an independent Methodist institution at the chapel on Hilltop in Burslem. That the handbill on the right advertises this as being in May 1843. And I've reason to believe that wasn't his first visit to preaching in that particular annual sermons in that particular chapel, because 1843 would have been too late for Barker Sutton until Sutton retired from the partnership in 1842. But interestingly, if you look at where the photograph of looking at the Hilltop Chapel in the middle, in the distance is the Enoch Wood factory, and about 200 yards behind 150 yards, 200 yards behind where the photographer is standing to take the photograph, was the Sitch pottery of Barker, Sutton and Till. So it's not impossible that it was on one of these visits that was done. If we can move on again to the next slide. In 1833, John Freeman of London was engaged by the Primitive Methodist Conference to engrave portraits of the travelling preachers for the magazine, etc. And he carried on doing this until 1854. His portrait on the left of Hugh Ball was first published in the Primitive Methodist magazine in 1835, and that of Clowes on the right in 1839. And these are the portraits which are used most commonly used on all subsequent Primitive Methodist commemorative pottery. So moving on to 1860, calculating, of course, from the formation of the first society, as mentioned on the class tickets in 1810, the jubilee of the connection was celebrated in 1860, and a fairly large quantity of pottery was produced in North Staffordshire, which illustrated Bourne and Clowes using the Freeman portraits, and the then just rebuilt Tunstall Primitive Methodist Chapel, which was rebuilt 1859 to 60 and named the Primitive Methodist Jubilee Chapel, which of course is where the Jubilee Conference was held, etc. Now the two items, the black teapot and the large jug, just have a transfer of which with the arabesques around them of the chapel in the middle and Bourne and Clowes, as does and the small two-handle cup in the right is in a slightly better quality pottery, and that has again has the transfers of the chapel and Bourne and Clowes, and in the at Englesea Brook we have that came from Stephen a complete dinner service of with which the only decoration on it is this these transfers of the chapel and Bourne and Clowes, marked W.C. and Co. for Wood, which is Wood, Challoner and Co. at Tunstall Pottery, with tureens, soup dishes, you know, about half a dozen or a dozen of each. There's hundreds of pieces of this thing. It's quite extraordinary, really. But there we go, and probably not unique, because if we move on to the next slide, please. We come on to some of the other transfers that we used. The tureen top right is mine. Somebody, which is sold without a lid, and somebody sent me a photograph of one with the lid on the left, so you can see that the complete tureen has which obviously comes from another dinner service. The has the chapel and ball and clouds on the lid, and then in the bowl is details of the foundation stone laying of the Tunstall Jubilee Chapel by a Mrs. Thomas Allen in 1859, December, I think, 1859. A lot of people have and still are trying to find out exactly who Mrs. Allen was, and I think so far without success. But there is I think Englesea Brook's got the actual foundation stone foundation stone laying trowel, silver trowel with the similar details on it. The mug and the love feast cup, and the very battered love feast cup at the bottom, have the details of the foundation stone laying again, the chapel trustees, the circuit details, and interestingly, the connectional, which makes it a sort of connectional commemoration, the connectional detail statistics for the 1859 in great detail. If we can move on to the next slide, please. But now the next big event, of course, is the centenary of the first camp meeting in 1907. Now, the pamphlet I show on the left is a list of delegates. In other words, the visitors to the camp meeting, a very long list with the addresses that they have been billeted at. You see, which of course, given that that's an audience that's definitely coming, it was a good place if you were making souvenirs to advertise your souvenirs. And interestingly, there are blocks of the adverts for various of the commemorative items in this pamphlet, beginning with this advert for bust portraits of Hugh Bourne and William Clowes on various items of jasperware, but produced by the Adams factory in Tunstall, and a list of the agents who were selling this stuff. Mainly, it has to be said, stationers and news agents. Interestingly, and I've put actual examples of the ones that illustrated in the advert underneath there. The next advertisement is for china teas, mugs for children, teas for schools, etc. Lifelike monochrome photographs of Bourne and Clowes, correct coloured view of Mow Cop, etc. And the agent for that is a chap called J.P. Humphreys of Pottery, Tunstall. And those that are marked often have two back stamps. One is for Grindleys, who produce the ware that these transfers are on, and the other underneath is John P. Humphreys, Pottery, Tunstall, about whom I know precisely nothing other than the fact that he found his census, found him on the census. The couple of the teapots the plate. There's all sorts of things are produced sold out under this heading. If we can move on to the next slide. This is a photograph of this, one of these at Englesea Brook. This of the centenary meeting in 1907, and in the Jubilee in the newly refurbished Jubilee Chapel, and a lot of the gentlemen there, illustrated, if you look carefully, would have made good use of the moustache cup, which is shown on the photograph on the right, which is another one of J.B. Humphrey's items. Next one, please. Yes. Now this advert is for Lingard and Webster and Co. of Swanbank Pottery High Street. I should have mentioned with the Humphreys stuff, the advert offers a discount to Sunday schools, etc., buying in bulk, so they could use the stuff to as a fundraiser, which is very interesting. But anyway, coming on to the Lingard and Webster stuff. Primitive Methodist centenary ware, teapots and stands, sets of jugs, large and small vases with portrait of ball and clouds. The teapot at the top is in the looking at the. I found that online, but I'm pretty certain that's in taken at Englesea Brook, that photograph, and the little vase at the bottom is mine, and on the teapot and the vase it has the inscription "Made at the factory where William Clowes gave his first address sermon," which is allegedly, and that's I don't know how clear it is, but the photograph in the middle at the top is of the. It was a bit woe-begotten. I just about remember that bit, the building of that old pottery, and it was a very, very run-down sort of place. But anyway, and the chap on the left is Arthur Jones, who is the Ann Co. in Lingard, Webster and Co. And he was the son of a Primitive Methodist minister, George Jones, which is in itself is interesting. Moving on. Now, yes, these are perhaps the most well-known and commonest of the Primitive Methodist commemorative items. These plates. There is an advert. The advert in that pamphlet, and the advert showing here is taken from the Primitive Methodist magazine. Primitive Methodist magazine. It's these adverts don't normally survive because, of course, they're lost when the magazines are bound. But I have an unbound in its original wrappers, the magazine in which this advert appears, and it's 100,000 plaques of the finest semi-porcelain are being manufactured and artistically designed to commemorate the forthcoming centenary Primitive Methodist. Object: the promoters have decided to give 2/3 of the profit for the liquidation of the debts, amounting to nearly £800, on the Primitive Methodist Chapel and United Methodist Free Church at Mow Cop. That's both of these chapels still exist. The UM chapel is the one at Mount Pleasant, Mow Cop, and of course the other one is the well-known Memorial Chapel at the top of the hill. The plates were produced in 3 grades of decoration, offered at 6pence, a shilling, and 1 3/8. Now, in fact, there are 4 grades of decoration, starting top left with a plain blue one. Then you get ones with gilding on. Then you get the coloured version, and then you get a fancier coloured version at the bottom. there are two different versions of the wording on the plates, which goes on to the next slide. Yeah, on the face of the plate itself, one version is this little cloud increaseth still, and the camp meeting was held at. On the other one, this little cloud increasing still, which first arose, and the camp meeting was celebrated at. I think the difference between held and celebrated, I think, is significant. But perhaps even more significant is the two different versions on the back, which give the statistics. The S, as it were, refer to adherents, whereas the ings refer to congregational members. And I think that is also an interesting shift in terminology, which is further hang on, where are we? Further reflected on some of the other plates later. But the next one I want to look at is these portrait busts produced by Hewitt and Leadbeater. So if we move on to the next slide. Yeah, these you have two portrait busts of Bourne and Clowes, produced by the maker's name is H and L, which is Hewitt and Leadbeater. Leadbeater is the same Leadbeater in or the same family as the Leadbeaters in the more well-known firm of Robinson and Leadbeater, who were big producers of Parian ware and Parian portrait busts and so on. And the little model of Mow Cop in the middle is also made in coloured Parian, and that is, I think it's got a back stamp relating to outfit calling themselves Tunstall Potteries, which was operating in the pre-First World War period. And I've seen somewhere these two portrait busts are not dated, but I'm sure I've seen somewhere ones that are dated 1908. So we're still talking round about the centenary. They're both obviously modelled using the Freeman portraits. And the larger version, what's shown in the top of the smaller version, the larger version, some of the larger version, which are the two at the bottom, which are the two at the bottom are from Englesea Brook, are coloured. I think the portrait of Bourne at the top is a bit unfortunate. The coloured version is distinctly camp, but there we go. The lady on the lady on the right in the photograph with the three examples of the three of the Bourne Clowes and the castle is the great niece of William Clowes, Sabra Badley, as her married name was. And the table that she's leaning on, which no longer exists, sadly, allegedly belonged to Clowes. And I'll put that in just for that interest. Her son, incidentally, was married to a cousin of my mother's. That's another story, so we'll move on. So that's going on to the next one. Yeah, this is is another one of the 1907 souvenirs, the plate in the middle. This is interesting because it shows the first chapel in Tunstall. It's a bit washed out, this plate. It should have splashes of colour in the portraits and whatnot, but anyway, it's the only example. It's the only example I've got of this showing the first chapel. But the other interesting thing is is the wording at the top, a souvenir of the Primitive Methodist Church centenary. And I think this shift of nomenclature away from society and connection to talking about church is quite interesting, and it's also something that occurred in the class tickets in 1902. The Primitive Methodist class tickets changed the heading from Primitive Methodist Connection to Primitive Methodist Church. And this is also reflected in this sort of move away from the use of the term society and connection is also reflected in the Wesleyan class tickets, because they changed from being headed Wesleyan Methodist Society to Wesleyan Methodist Church a few years earlier in 1894. Moving on again, we now come to the centenary in 1910, when probably the most interesting item produced that is this plate, which was manufactured by Dalton's, but as it says on the inscription, it was produced for A. Humphreys, Wesley Place, Tunstall. Annie Elizabeth Humphreys and her husband John Humphreys, but I don't think it's the same John Humphreys as the J.P. Humphreys on the 1907 plates. They were China dealers, and online currently is the postcard I show below of their shop on eBay. Unfortunately, it's priced at £95, which is why I think it's been sitting on eBay for the last couple of years. But nonetheless, that was an interesting thing to come across. The plate on the left is another set of the transfers that were used in on the 1910 commemoratives. This shows again, it's the Freeman portraits of Bourne and Clowes, Mow Cop, and the Jubilee Chapel as renovated. But both the Mow Cop and the Jubilee Chapel are reversed from the actuality. In other words, they mirror images. Jubilee Chapel was actually the other way round. You see what I mean? The side which is on the left is actually on the right hand side. There we go. And also this one has this God buries his workmen, but the work carries on the work, and the connectional statistics for 1910. This particular plate was produced by has a back stamp for impressed back stamp for Hollingshead and Kirkham, Tunstall Potter, and the Unicorn Pottery in Tunstall. But all those transfers were also put onto ware, bone china ware, mugs and beakers and things produced by, and plates produced by Dalton Blanks. The mug on the can you go back? That's it. The mug on the right hand side, which is produced by Empire Porcelain in Stoke, talks about the Primitive Methodist Church again, which is interesting. Centenary 1910. Swindon Circuits Sunday School celebration, July 25th, 1910. And there are quite a few of these similar mugs with different, produced with different Sunday school names on it, on them, which is interesting. And if we can move on to the last, oh no, this is we go on to this one, which is this is the stuff produced for the 150th anniversary camp meeting in 1957. Now, The arrangements for the celebrations in 1957 were made by the Stoke-on-Trent Methodist Historical Committee, whose correspondence file I have, but it makes no mention of pottery. But I suspect from the symbolism on the pottery that they had some input into the design. You'll see that the pottery, both the jug and the vase have the Mow Cop Folly Castle on one side and the then Methodist logo, interestingly, with the shell motif with the M on the other side, and no mention of primitive Methodist on it. It says the centenary, which of course 1957 was very close, not that long after Methodist Union, which was still a sore point in parts of North Staffordshire, so that that's it just says the centenary of the first English camp meeting, and the little the folly at the model of the folly at the back was made by a modeler called herself Jessie Van Hallen. It's dated May 1957, so it obviously relates to the celebrations. Now, she was a modeler at some time in her career for Wades, and that the glazes on the folly at the bottom look very much like Wades, and I'm wondering whether Wades in fact made the vases and the two portrait plaques of Bourne and Clowes, which are obviously part of the same range, because they also include the shell motif with the logo with the M at the top there, which is interesting. And that's really where I end the sequence, except for a last item, which is the next item, which is this teapot. There are two of these somewhat enigmatic teapots in the collection at Englesea Brook, as well as this one in my own collection. They appear to be made in 1899 to commemorate the centenary of the Tunstall Wesleyan Methodist Sunday School, and they reproduce the wording on the foundation stone of the then and soon to be in 1899 to be replaced Sunday School building, laid on the 28th of June 1838, being the coronation day of Queen Victoria I. Quote. So that I always think that this teapot is in fact a memorial of a memorial, as it were. And so I conclude this talk with words from the book of Joshua, chapter 4. And Joshua spake unto the children of Israel, saying, when your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what mean these stones? Then ye shall let your children know. End of.